Well, welcome aboard, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm here to talk about our next port of call, which I'm sorry to say is not Madagascar. That was our intended itinerary, but due to the cyclone Chibdo that came in and damaged the port facilities in northern Madagascar as of a few weeks ago, we are going to the Isle of Réunion, which I have titled here as the once new frontier of France, because this rocky, distant island is one of the outre-mer territories of France with all of the privileges of being part of the greater world nation. Um, but it's about 800 sea miles to the east of Madagascar. So our course from the Seychelles has taken us down the east coast of Madagascar and to this rather lonely island. Now, it is, again, in the Madagascar Basin. You see Le Port, Mozambique. The Indian Ocean opens up to this wide, vast, tumultuous at times Southern Ocean, which is part of the world ocean, but where the seas will continue around without much land to block or cause various weather phenomena and current conditions. But Réunion is out in the central Indian Ocean south of the equator and is curiously located not near anything that anybody, let's say, it's not on the way to anywhere unless you're going from South Africa toward Indonesia and other parts, which ancient mariners did. But this territory of France is near Mauritius, which also used to be French and British and is now an independent country. Similarly, Madagascar had been a French colony for a number of decades, century, and there are many other small islands that are still claimed by France, particularly Mayotte and the Bas d'Indy, l'Europe, and other islands further south, Kerguelen and Saint Croix in the Southern Ocean. This is a remnant of the great naval empire, and a curiosity because so many European countries had territories around the world, and as colonialism and empires faded, these little bits and specks here there are held to this day. You see that France itself has a number of Caribbean islands and Polynesia, of course, Caledonia, southern and Antarctic territories, but Réunion is in the tropical climes and a little more pleasant than the claims that France has on Adélie land. A number of countries have taken a slice of the pie of the ice of Antarctica, but by convention they don't press any territorial claims there. But meanwhile, these islands are considered strategic listening points or hold some strategic value in some naval calculations. You see the larger one up in the central Indian Ocean, the British Ocean, Indian Ocean Territory, which is also known as the Chagos Islands. And I'll talk about that as we go up toward there. That is disputed with Mauritius. But meanwhile, this island, Réunion, is a craggy volcanic remnant of a larger mountain area that has risen from the Earth's crust as the seas have spread. And there are various other islands around the world that sort of look like this, and that mostly extinct volcanoes slowly eroding back into the ocean. But there are only about 800,000 people who live here on the craggy coasts and a few villages up in the mountains. But you can see these two large caldera volcanic valleys that are what give Réunion a very dramatic topography, particularly the Piton de Neige and the Piton de Fournaise, the peak in the clouds and the peak of the oven, because that's the one place that has still some active lava flow. And then all the villages and towns are around the shore, and the capital Saint-Denis is on the north. But it looks like this rocky, crumbly coast through most of it. There are a few beaches, but the island is so recent in that it's the last rise of it was about 3 million years ago, and so it does not have enough downfall, erosion, or flat shelf around it to develop many coral reefs. But on the inland, it has this tremendous craggy volcanic landscape and very difficult to get around. So this is an island that it looks a lot like Madeira, if you know, the Portuguese island off of the coast of mainland Portugal, with very unstable soil but where you can very rich agriculture. And so we go into what's called Le Port, which is a facility built for shipping because Saint-Denis, the capital, has a difficult exposure to the sea. And this particular port has been connected to the capital by this tremendous roadway. We zipped along it with the old, you can see the old road on the right side and the new road on the left side with the barriers for the ocean. The storms that come and go at this cyclone zone will put tremendous waves against these cliffs, and just show this to you because this my friend there said this is the most expensive road in France, €1 million per meter or something to build the seawall and then the struts so people get around from the port to the capital of Saint-Denis, which is a town of maybe 200,000 people, but it's on a flat land with exposed coast. And so this is the jumping off point to go around the island. And literally in a day you can drive all the way around the island, or if you're more adventuresome, go up into the mountains. But this is where most people live and work, and the capital is tropical French, very proudly French. And so that's the curious fate of this island, unlike others scattered around the world that they're more patriotic for the homeland than some of the homelanders are back in they call Métropole France. And anyway, here's the port where we actually came in, that breakwater for safety. But this whole area was unknown to any human inhabitation till the 1540s, when Portuguese navigators came around Cape Hope following in the footsteps of Diaz and Vasco da Gama. This Dom Pedro de Mascarenhas came over and found these islands, being Réunion, Mauritius, and other scattered islands, the Seychelles, all of these Indian island oceans that were not in themselves of much value except for stopping off and finding water and food and such. But he came and there were no inhabitants. And so this was unbelievable to the Europeans, that they'd go to places that no humans had ever even seen before. Of course, going north in the Indian Ocean, there were plenty of other islands and coasts that had seen visitors from Asia and Africa and Europe well before. But the island groups around here are still called Mascarenhas in general. But when the French came, they decided to settle. And this gentleman, Mahe de Bourdonnais, came and sent settlers and established a colony, a plantation system for the French, who considered these islands important because many of the trade routes came through here. And after the Portuguese had diminished, the French and the English and the Dutch, etc., came in and tried to hold the strategic routes around Africa. This was before the Suez Canal made that somewhat far away and not important. But he claimed it as French territory under the name of Louis XV. Mahe was born in Saint-Malo, that's the reference to his Mahe, and he was head of the Navy, and he claimed it as Ile de Bourbon. 1816 it returned to that name. It had been in 1792 renamed Réunion after the meeting of the Marseillaise and Parisian militia in revolution against the Bourbon king. Well, this is sort of the back and forth of both France and the rest of the world, that others would claim it and take it back. But the French Indian Ocean Company, Compagnie des Indes de France, cast cannons in their name. They had that name, and like the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company. They were privately chartered monopolies from the crown and power of the government, but they sent settlers and invested in plantations. So this was an early symbol of the Isle of Réunion, with a Latin saying "Floribus quacumque faire," which is we flourish wherever we go, and make an effort. But though this emblem is curious, it has sort of natives from somewhere around King Neptune who seems to be at the spa, taking it easy while others work. And so these islands were quickly exploited for their excellent timber, particularly ebony. Old-growth ebony forests were cut down. Sugar cane was planted. There was plenty of fish, and they had strange animals like the giant tortoise and the dodo bird, which was here also, but went extinct. So the French and the others started setting up settlements, but it was a long way from anywhere. Nonetheless disputed in the Napoleonic War. So in 1810, the British came and invaded both Réunion and Mauritius and stormed the bays and the inlands and took over Mauritius and Réunion, though Réunion was returned to France in 1814 by the Treaty of Paris. And so this was the World War that beat up all kinds of faraway places here. Most famously, the battle at the port in Mauritius saw the defeat of a number of British ships who couldn't get into the secluded, protected waters in a dramatic battle at the time. And it's one of the only French naval victories in the Napoleonic era. Well, in Réunion, they did set up the plantation life. Even the British came nominally and they left, and similar in Mauritius, the local people were a blend of French colonists, Africans, Indians, Indonesians, and made a fairly healthy and prosperous, if unequal, society, growing sugarcane and vanilla and other precious spices, and had, let's say, a Creole society. And to this day, most people speak of French Creole mixed with some Malagasy and some Tamil Indian and a lot of slang in the local parlance, though they all will study French en école. And meanwhile, the capital, Saint-Denis, is still armed, waiting for the British to come back. But everybody's welcome now. And so this place became a faraway outpost of France, but it was nonetheless an important naval base and saw some action in World War I and II. But this was the famous local son, Roland Garros, who was an aviator who fought in the World War I and invented, for instance, that important thing of the machine gun that could shoot through the time to the propeller, and was a famous aviator ace at the time. In World War II, the Vichy government had nominal control here, but the Free French Navy came in on the ship Le Leopard and proclaimed it part of the Gaullist Free France. This is remembered in all the civic buildings and the government sponsored memorials of the wars and the different things. So this is where you are in tropical Indian Ocean, but you have a mairie and houses that reflect the classical French designs. And there was a elite that ran the island. Now they're, well, let's say they're not so in silk stockings as they used to be. The island's fairly prosperous and is proud of its French tradition, and it is mostly Catholic with many churches and universities. And this is considered, if it's part of France, it's also part of Africa, because most of the population has ancestry in the other wider Indian Ocean, but they have all the services and education, medical care of the larger nation. And so it makes it a particularly convenient vacation spot for the Francophone to come around. Much of Africa is actually French-speaking, so this is part of the great mix, including many Indians, mostly from Tamil Nadu, And in recognition of the diversity, they have festivals and appreciation of it all. And the Réunion had, because of its isolation and, let's say, distances, always and the troubles back in the Metropole, France has thought it could possibly be independent. And so there is a local flag, which they call the Rayonnais, the montagne Rayonnais, like a volcano that's giving off light there. And so you see this flag around, but below the French national flag, and then the motto continues of the industriousness, and you see actually an active volcano up on the upper left side of that particular emblem. And the town itself is Saint-Denis has, every area has its own iconographic view of itself. The ship's coming to the volcanic mountain and going for a holiday, and that's the business of most people in tourism now. I mean, there's still agriculture, but the jet set has arrived here, so there are many sweet little resorts. And because the ocean is fairly rough and there's not that many coral reefs, there's what they call lagoons that they are built so that they break the waves but give you a easy time on the beach. You can see most of the beaches here are volcanic, brown and gray, and some of the kind of singing sands. Here's one strip of white sand beach behind some of the corals on the southeast side of the island, which is pleasant to walk out on and easy to snorkel. Inland, there are these large valleys with sugar cane and some coffee, vanilla beans, lots of fruits and vegetables. Curiously, the vanilla is a wild plant that was first known in Mexico, but was very difficult to grow because there was a certain beetle that would pollinate it, and then a Réunion enslaved young man watched the bugs crawling on it. He figured he could do that too, so he invented the way to fertilize the vanilla bean and then produce a bumper crop, and that became a major high value agriculture for these little inland valley areas that have limited space. But they're very dramatic, and there are roads up and down into these formerly difficult to get to little towns up on the ledges in the valleys of the volcanoes. And that in the summer rainy season is sort of a relief to go up there in the cool air. Here's one of the classic churches in a kind of Portuguese style, and other ones are modernistic chapels and parishes up in the mountains in particular. Here's the mayor's office of the town of Salazie being a Malagasy word, and its local church, which has been blazoned on it, "Chez nous, soyez reine," you will be the queen in here. I think they're inviting Mary to come in. And then up on the high ridges is the piton, the high peaks of it. This one says it's the neige, meaning snow, but usually it's only because it has cloud cover. And maybe some alpinistes wish it was snow, but otherwise it's all loose rock and active faults and landslides, and somewhat dangerous to go hiking up there because there's not much stable ground. But here's a chapel of the Pont d'Escalier, the bridge of the staircase that goes up the mountain. And on one eastern side, the little town had a chapel where they dubbed it Notre Dame des Laves, Our Lady of the Lava, because a lava flow about 100 years ago came down and surrounded this chapel and filled up the church with hot burning lava. Well, it maybe not been too hot because the building itself was not damaged. And they then cleared out the rubble and the trouble of it, and it's sort of a testament to survival, and including they put in new stained glass windows, say blessing the next hot flow there. And up just above the church, somebody mounted up another Notre Dame de les Laves, the Our Lady of the Lava. And if you're adventuresome, you can go hiking up into the sometimes active vents of it, but they keep it locked off because people tend to slip and fall and get cooked. So here's the Piton de la Fournaise, the furnace peak with its vast slopes that go down to the ocean, because this is where they still have some activity, so many years with monitoring stations, and then they let people come in where it's cooled off and think, this could get exciting if we just would have a little hot fire coming out of the mountain. You see the names they give for these, the Grand Brûlé, the Great Burn, les Grands Ponts, the vents, and the other curious Rampart de Bellecombe, and French dramatic names for what is otherwise a big wall of hot melting earth coming at you. And so they close it off when this starts to happen, sort of like a Indian Ocean version of what's seen in Hawaii, including the vents go down and then they hit the sea and they create incredible steam vapors which tend to cook people who get too close. And then upland you can go hiking through some of the cool lava tubes and see phenomena like this, which looks like it's chocolate but doesn't taste the same. And then out on the mountain you have tremendous waterfalls and cliffs. So this is very dramatic land with the remnant of the old forests somewhat being restored, but much of the good timber went into shipping and is at the bottom of the sea now. But there are a few local endemic animals, not quite lush like Madagascar. Here's a little shrew called the tenrec. But the island is mostly known because nowadays it produces, as it says, the garden of perfumes and spices. The vanilla, the geranium, the other scented plants and spices are grown in these kind of forested plantations. So they've gone toward a sustainable forestry, in that rather than clearing and planting in a monoculture, they allow all this variety to happen in the forest itself, and some of it's just decorative. I mean, and some are just fantastic, like these trees that are covered with other epiphyne plants all over. And this is the jackfruit, which was a source of food and still is. One of the locals said they cook it just for the good old days, though it's sort of a lot of trouble, kind of starchy, not much flavor to it. But nowadays they have all the foie gras they want. But then again, the shore is rough, and these islands were not settled because probably it was very difficult approach, and there was no other land nearby to come to this island. So most of the people have descended from the recent immigration and are healthy and proud. They don't have malaria or the other afflictions of Madagascar and mainland Africa, so it's considered a pretty healthy place. Meanwhile, on the other side, I'll mention this just because this has been in the news. We were to go to the northern Port Nosy at Madagascar, but the hurricane cut right across that part of the island and hit Mayotte, which is a French territory near the Comoros Islands off the coast of Mozambique. And this is one of the local contentions of the European remnant islands versus the independent, small, desperate nations of, in this case, Comoros, where, right near Mayotte, when the other islands were given their independence with a bit of a support and a good luck, this island was kept for mainly military purposes So there would be a string of French islands going up the East African coast. Again, volcanic, characterized by calderas and steep seas, some coral. But most of the residents are immigrants from Mozambique via the Comoros Islands, and mostly Muslim, and so they have a mosque on the island and more on the inland that are sort of modernistic. Again, the islanders are mostly farmers and then some fishing, some tourism, but this is what happened in December with this cyclone. Chido came through and tore up so much, but it got in the news because Mayotte is French territory, and it already had a problem of too many refugee and illegal immigrants and shanty towns full of people that had come over from either the mainland Mozambique or else via the Comoros Islands, and there were 100,000 or more that were camping around the town, and the French didn't know what to do because you have this kind of immigration all around in France already, but this is just one between a few remote islands in the Indian Ocean. But the devastation was pretty extensive, and the death toll is unknown, just because these isles were right in the bullseye of the particular cyclone. So that it ended up in national news because President Macron came down to reassure the people that France would help them and such, and he was only sort of criticized for, gee, why are you only helping the poor people on your island, but there's all these other places that are equally in distress, and France gives a token, but it's taking care of its own, even though maybe, sort of wonder why do these little bits of colonies still exist? Well, that's because they do. But meanwhile, the people of Réunion are a fairly happy, contented lot. This gentleman who runs a sugarcane farm said he's descended from the pirates that came over from Madagascar and the French corsair, and has a proud tradition. Here's someone probably from Madagascar, or Malagasy they call them. The largest plurality of people are from Madagascar, and so there's a youthful population and very mixed culture. Again, they speak French, Creole, English, Malagasy, Hindi, whatever their background. This fellow is from India. Here's someone also from Tamil Nadu. So there are living traditions from the other places, but it's kind of a mixture, making a kind of a happy cooperation on an island that has nothing else to do but cooperate and tend to their life in spite of all the troubles, particularly in, again, larger France or the larger world. Here's a woman who came from Vietnam and has run shops and industries there. And here's the imam of a local mosque, who you can tell he's been praying a lot because of the lump on his head from praying, and other mixed French, European, Asian, Indian. It's all a lovely place, and particularly when you have time just to relax and enjoy the different sights. I mean, beaches are, if not a dime a dozen, a number for your euro here. And so a lot of people come down here just to get far away from it all, which is our pleasure. And this is why we travel, so we can rediscover places and ourselves. So I look forward to seeing you ashore and on to the next island. Thank you. Et bon voyage.